Hey guys, how you doing today? It's good to be back with you. I hope you had a great 4th of July weekend and you've had a great couple weeks off of school. So I did something on 4th of July weekend I've never done before. I went rock crawling with three of my sons. We went up to central Pennsylvania, and two of my sons have these heavily modified Jeeps. Big tires, they're all jacked up, and we went crawling over these huge boulders and rocks and through streams and mud holes and all kinds of stuff. And we had so much fun. I've never done that before. And fortunately, we didn't get stuck. Nothing really broke down. But we just had fun together. And that's partly, what summer's about. It's just having fun with your family, having fun with your friends, and just hanging out. So I hope you had a good 4th of July weekend. We're going to go ahead and continue on in our series of awesome guys in the Bible. And so far we've talked about Caleb and Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And today we're going to spend just a few moments and talk about one of my favorite guys of all time in the Bible, and that's Joseph. He was a pretty cool guy. And the thing about Joseph is I like to think of him as a man of forgiveness, because he forgave his brothers for all the bad things they did to him, right? So what does it mean to forgive? Well, probably in the simplest terms, it just means letting go of your right to punish somebody, Somebody does something wrong to you, you want to get back at them, or you want to punish them. But when you forgive them, you let go of that right to do that. And that's, the whole Bible's really about forgiveness, isn't it? Especially the story of Joseph. Now, I think we've talked about Joseph before, but just in a nutshell, you remember what happened to him? Remember, Joseph had 11 brothers. He had 10 older brothers and one younger brother. And the 10 older brothers got mad at him. They were jealous of him, right? Because his father really liked him. Joseph was one of his dad's favorites, and his brothers got all jealous about it. So what did they do? They decided to kill him. So they put him into a pit. But before they actually decided to kill him, they decided to sell him off into slavery. So they sold him off to some traveling slave owners. And later on, he got falsely accused by a prominent soldier. He went to prison unjustly. He was left in prison for a long time, and he was hoping to get out, but he was in prison for a long time. And can you imagine? Remember we had our segment, I don't know, a while back about prisons and how horrible they were, and back in that day. But he was left in prison for a long time. But do you think God forgot about Joseph? Not at all. Because God was really working on Joseph's heart. And eventually God made Joseph, he put him in command, second in command of all of Egypt. So in a way, that's sort of like being the vice president of the United States. You're second in command. And why did God put him in charge, second in charge over Egypt? Well, God knew that there was going to be 7 years of plenty in terms of growing crops. And after that, there was going to be 7 years of famine. So when Joseph was in command, second in command in Egypt, God had him store up grain for 7 years. And they built these huge silos and bins to store grain for all of Egypt. And then pretty soon, the 7 years of famine came. And about the second year of the famine or so, Joseph's family was starving up in Canaan. And so they decided to go to Egypt, not knowing that Joseph was there, to try and buy grain, buy some food, so they could live. And eventually, Joseph's brothers meet up with Joseph. And they did not know it was Joseph, but Joseph knew it was them. Okay? And Joseph took care of them. And he gave them grain. He sent food home with them. And then eventually, Joseph's father and his whole family and all their flocks, all their horses, all their sheep, they all moved to Egypt to live because Joseph had stored up food for everyone. You know, it's really quite an awesome story. And yet when we talk about forgiveness, Joseph probably had every right to be mad at his brothers, didn't he? You guys ever get mad at your brothers or your sisters? You know, sometimes they do things wrong to you and it's like, oh, I'm going to get back at you, or I'm going to get even. Man, you don't want to do that. But Joseph, he didn't want to do that to us because he loved his brothers. You know, and it's really an amazing story because here in Genesis chapter 50, verse 19 and 20. Let's read that. So why don't you go to Genesis chapter 50. You know, Genesis is the first book in the Bible. And let me just read it out of my Bible here, okay? And it says, but Joseph said to them, now he's talking to his family, his brothers, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? In other words, am I where God wanted me to be? He says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives, so people wouldn't starve. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And Joseph reassured them and spoke kindly to them. So Joseph really loved on his brothers, and he forgave them for what they did. And it's really an example of how we should forgive others. So does the Bible talk about forgiveness anyplace else? Sure. How about Ephesians 4:32? That's a verse we probably all know, right? And it says, be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven you. So God tells us to have a tender heart toward people and to forgive them. And in Matthew, remember the story about Peter, and Peter comes up to the Lord and says, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? And Jesus says this to Peter, he says, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but 70 times 7. So what's 70 times 7? I know you guys are good in math. It's like 490, right? But in reality, what Jesus is saying is you always forgive people. You don't keep track. And sometimes with our friends, we have to forgive them multiple times, don't we? Or maybe our brothers and our sisters, because they keep doing things to us they shouldn't be doing. And so we forgive them. And so who's like the ultimate example of forgiveness? It's really Jesus. Because you remember when he was on the cross, what did he say when he was talking to his Father? He's on the cross and people are saying all kinds of bad things against him. And he says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. So even Jesus, right before he dies, he asked the Father, Lord, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. So do you have to do something to be forgiven? Did we have to be somebody special for God to forgive us, for Jesus to forgive us? No, he forgives us just the way we are, right? Right where we're at. And it's the same thing that we should be doing with other people. They don't have to become good for us to forgive them when they do something wrong. Your brothers and sisters, do they have to then become nice for you to forgive them? No. God just wants you to forgive them no matter what. All right? So let me ask you to think about this. Do you need to forgive somebody? Has somebody done something against you that you need to forgive them? Or has somebody said something against you? You know, a lot of times we get our feelings hurt and we want to hold a grudge against somebody. But God doesn't want us to do that. Was somebody mean towards you? Maybe. But God still wants you to forgive them, right? He certainly does. Maybe your friends get invited to a party and you don't get invited. A swim party, a pool party, whatever it might be. And you don't get invited and your feelings get hurt. Well, you know what? You just need to forgive them. Because God loves you. And he's got something special for you. Just like God had something special for Joseph. So this week I want you to go ahead and think about, is there somebody I need to forgive? And if you do, then let them know that you forgive them. You guys have a great week. And Mr. Zach and I are missing you, and we will talk to you soon. All right? God bless you guys. We'll see you later.